Ooh, spooky! No, okay. Welcome to GothCast. I'm Dr. Sanders, and today I'm taking a look at something unique. You know, something that probably some of you have some very heavy and loving emotions about, and some people may have some disdain for the creator, and some people may have no idea what I'm talking about. But what this is Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. And yeah, it's a pretty interesting book. The specific version I'm looking at today is the director's cut of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. It was first released in 1997. I think it's been published and reprinted a few times. I know that some people said they've seen it even at Hot Topic. The comic was initially published from 1995 to 1997, 7 issues, and there's a few little interstitial things that I'll talk about. But it tells the story of this guy named Johnny who is a homicidal maniac. And he has his neighbor Squee, who's this little kid, and he's always protecting in his own very unique way. But then you also have other characters like Devi and these weird little Pillsbury Doughboy guys. And there's a lot to this story and a lot that happens in it. One of the things I want to talk about right off the bat is the violence obviously associated with this book. I know, especially in something where it's called Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, people are expecting something violent, something a little bit crazy, and this book definitely has the violence and gore up there. The book is in black and white, so it's not as, I guess, chilling or like, oh, as gross, I guess, to some people. But the content of it, the way in which Johnny speaks and the way in which the other characters speak, it is very dark. It's not a very hopeful book for most of it, and that may actually turn some people off, but that's also what appeals to so many people, is that it is a very dark look at something very, I don't know, very taboo. Obviously serial killers and all this sort of stuff. A lot of people have a lot of interest in it, and even mainstream media has this huge interest in serial killers and all this stuff, but that's a whole different discussion. This book really delves into kind of the the negatives of isolation and what they can do, and some of that is can be interpreted your own way, as if Johnny is a good or bad character. But I'll kind of talk about that in just a minute, in my opinion. But the basic story is that Johnny is killing people, and he's taking their blood and he's painting this wall with blood. Because he's afraid of this creature. He says, like, when the blood dries up, and then I could hear it trying to break through. And his little Pillsbury Doughboy guys and his little nail bunny, it's funny that he nailed to this wall, speak to him. And, it's kind of obviously supposed to hint that he's like crazy, he's losing his mind, and that, like, oh, is this even really happening, is kind of the question for a little bit of it. That's sort of the basic setup, is that he's killing all these people, and he has his own reasons for killing these people. He says that, these people are a-holes, and that like this person was, told me to be quiet at the movies, and this person picked on me, and he goes into like a fast food restaurant and just hates all the people in there. So he has his own like little nonsensical reasons for killing people, and you could say that some of them are justified if you're like, oh, a bully should be killed or something, I don't know, But it's just these crazy things that he's kind of come up with to justify his murders. But I think he doesn't really care, because the character's a little bit not thinking of that. I will say that some of these deaths, and actually quite a few, are very chilling in their own way, just because of the dialogue. You have somebody who is having a very calm conversation with him, and he's surprised by this. The guy isn't really begging for his life, and even when he does, he says, do you think you could let me go? And he's like, no, I don't think so. And he's like, well, why aren't you afraid? He's like, well, if I know that you're gonna kill me, I have nothing to fear, because I know that I'm gonna go somewhere else. And he kills him. He's like, well, that wasn't satisfying. So there is this kind of dynamic and this sort of like kind of look into what is satisfying about killing him, and what is a serial killer really, what goes on in a serial killer's head. What is, can even killing somebody, which for somebody who's a homicidal maniac may be really gratifying, can it be this very disappointing thing when it's not the reaction, or is it all about the reaction? There's some of those things that are touched upon. I would say that this book is mostly extremely animated. It'd be hard to kind of just put yourself in that situation, because it is so far removed from it. And if you do end up picking up this book, don't just take it at face value. Yes, there is some what people will call serial killer rhetoric in here, where it talks about the masses and all these sort of things that, you know, if you get so wrapped up in it, it could seem like, oh, like this is like a way of thinking that's different than the mainstream, all that stuff. But you gotta remember that this is a character, and even Jhonen Vasquez has distanced himself from this character somewhat because of the content. And you know, throughout the book, you're gonna see, you know, if you do read it or if you have read it, you'll notice that Johnny tends to go through a whole bunch of different moods and emotions throughout it. There's even a point where him and Debbie, you know, he really likes this girl, but he just can't not try and kill her. I mean, it's just weird. So he's like, I need to immortalize this moment. And he's thinking that, oh, I can kill her and do that. Which is obviously very creepy for most women to imagine that. Somebody would be like that. But it is this weird thing where he struggles with this sort of inner voice in his head. And on the violence of the book, you know, if it may seem too crazy or you may think, oh, this is the devil's book or something. Here's what Jhonen Vasquez has to say about the ultra violence of the book. It's for people who hopefully can separate themselves from the ugly, ridiculous behavior they see in the book. They can see it as something humorous and yet at the same time recognize it as something they carry inside themselves. You know, not everybody is perfect. You know, a lot of people have dark thoughts throughout their life, and you know, in some ways may be able to relate to this character in his darkest moments, but you know, we obviously don't all act on our most violent tendencies. It's just not something we do. I mean, hopefully. I mean, you know, I don't know who's watching this video. There's probably definitely somebody who's watching this video. But I do want to talk about, there's going to be a little bit of spoilers, okay? Kind of the questions and what Johnny goes throughout this book. And if you read it, then, you know, this is for your part. If you haven't, then I don't want to accidentally spoil anything for you. It seems like throughout the earlier part of this compiled thing, you know, the first few issues, it's kind of hinting that the little Pillsbury Doughboy guys and Nail Bunny, they're more a psychological problem in, you know, he's dealing with, and that, you know, when he's with Debbie, he has this inner monologue, and then they kind of convince him to, you know, try and attack her. It's sort of interesting that it seems like it's very heavily hinting at that, but then as the book goes on, and you know, later in the book when the victims are trying to escape, the Pillsbury Doughboy, they can actually hear the Pillsbury Doughboys are kind of reacting. They're like, oh, did you speak? And they're like, no, of course we didn't speak, you know? And the monster actually is behind the wall, you know, so it's not really psychological at all. You know, it's not just all in his head, like there actually is a physical monster behind this wall. I think a lot of people would just think he was probably crazy. And it's interesting that Johnny's character is somewhat likable, okay? And I know that a lot of people, you know, really like this character, like the image of him. They, you know, there's t-shirts and stuff, and people like that. And I know that people, you know, obviously like serial killers and stuff. I mean, but for Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, I think it's really interesting that the writer, you know, Jhonen Vasquez gave him a very layered personality. You know, he kills these people and for what he feels are justified reasons. But then there's another killer who he meets who says like, oh, I killed this little girl, and basically implies that he raped her, and he just thinks that this is horrible, it was something that is unforgivable, and he rips open his chest and then he like slams a hammer into his organs, and so it shows this bit of morality, you know, and as somebody who like can't even watch a movie if it has rape, you know, that's something that I find totally interesting, you know. And even Squee, you know, the little kid Squee, his neighbor, there's this guy who obviously it's implying that he's very much he's a pedophile in this book, and he's talking to Squee, and Johnny attacks him and kills him, and you know, trying to make his point, he shows Squee, he's like, oh look, Squee, like, you know, he's just a human, and like chops off his body parts and stuff, trying to help him, you know, trying to show him that there's nothing to be afraid of, but then it just like kind of scars him. You know, it shows that he does have these alliances and these feelings, you know, he feels like he has to protect Squee. Even if he doesn't say directly that he's protecting him, you know, that's an example of where somebody was trying to take advantage of him and do him harm, and comes out and protects him. And it just shows that he does have these emotions, and it's really interesting to give somebody who is that kind of, you know, who would probably, if you just took a few stills from this book, you know, would seem like a very unlikable, just, you know, one-note character, of just killing a bunch of people. But that's not really how this book is, and it's very surprising. You know, reading it every time, I'm always surprised at how much I feel a little bit of sympathy for this character. You know, even though he's doing these very horrible things, but you know, with the idea that this stuff isn't just in his head, that he actually may be being controlled somewhat by some other force, and that he shows these emotions outside of this killing. It's just, it's just crazy. And even the end ends on a somewhat hopeful note that he'll try and find something different. But there's never been any more Jhonen Homicidal Maniac. In fact, the 1997 one was the end of it. Yeah, that's all we have for it. But you know, maybe sometime there'll be a renewed interest and he'll make a new one. But I'm not really counting on it because it's been like 20 years. So yeah, do that what you will. I do want to talk about some of these smaller stories inside of this book. So in between the main Johnny stories, there are these random little stories like Happy Noodle Boy, which is like this crudely drawn little comic. And then there's the story of Anguish, who's this goth girl. And it's really funny because Jhonen Vasquez says that he made her the most beautiful character on the outside because she's the most ugly on the inside. But she's like, you know, the typical, what I would see is like the typical goth who's like, you know, she's like, oh, like, you know, let's go out. She's like, well, I just need to do my makeup, so I'll be ready in 3 hours. So it's just really funny. Basically, all the Anguish comics are a commentary on goth culture, you know, kind of poking fun in it, and it's so friggin' true. That's why it's so funny. Probably my only complaints with this book at all are that I feel like I'm getting too old because I feel like I'm blind and I can't see how small the font is for some of this, especially whenever it's like the centerfold fold out one, flip the other way. It's pretty much my only complaint is that I'm blind and old, you know, 400 years old. So, you know, what can I say? But that's pretty much it. I really recommend this. Of course, if you're not into gore, you're not into this psychological stuff, of course, if you just don't want to hear a serial killer's point of view, then this book may not be for you. And it's definitely not for everybody. It definitely, I know some people will probably read this and just see the killing and not be able to feel he's a relatable character. I can totally understand that. But I really enjoyed this. So, and I've been reading it for well over a decade. That's pretty much my review of Jhonen Homicidal Maniac. And I hope that you have enjoyed it. And of course, you can like, comment, subscribe, and of course, just you know, just remember to be out there and stay spooky. I'm going this way.